Hi everyone, good to be here. As just introduced, I'm James Berzins, I'm the CEO of CareScan. Today we're here to have an open conversation about what it really takes to bring point-of-care scanning and inventory management systems into NHS theatres. We recognise that operational theatres are under increased pressure all the time. We've got productivity targets, we've got safety demands, we've got regulatory scrutiny. And this is all happening simultaneously, so we've got to use technology to the best of our advantage. There are NHS-wide initiatives like Scan for Safety, and GIRF, we've heard GIRF talk about a few times today, and they put an emphasis on digital traceability being at the heart of patient safety. But the gap between, I think, that policy ambition and what really happens in theatres can be quite stark, and what we wanted to do is bring this to life, speak to people who've been there, done it, their experience to share with us. So before we get into it, I'm going to introduce Ish and Marc, and we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves and what we do.
Thank you. Yes, so my name is Ish. I'm at this hospital. I'm a surgeon by trade. I spend a lot of time in theatre, and naturally I do look at a lot of data, and that's drawn me to both data and data analytics and how this links in with patient safety, etc. I do hold a few other roles, but bottom line, it all comes down to data and digital to try and make care better.
Marc, yourself?
I'm Marc Saaiman, the Deputy Head of Procurement at South East Hospital Trust. I look after the procurement function there, as well as being the Scan for Safety champion, which I've been doing for about 5 years now, which has overseen not only the implementation of the CareScan standards, but also point-of-care inventory management of the trust.
Cool, so we're going to start with challenges. What are theatres really up against when it comes to using this technology? Ish, I'll start with you as a surgeon. I guess you're at the sharp end of this every day. What are the real clinical challenges that theatres face when you're running manual paper processes? And what does point-of-care scanning actually do to make a difference?
It's an interesting question, and some of this was covered in the morning session, both around data and around patient safety. Let's look at 2 examples, or maybe 3 examples. First example I would say is, if every organization thinks, and I'll have a think, if there is an alert issued by an organization to say that implant was faulty, get all the patients, inform them, and do X, Y, Z. How many organizations can do that very quickly? Now, traditionally, in most hospitals, as we had up until 4 or 5 years ago, it's a manual process. We would type in, we used to do it on our EPR, so it would be a matter of typing all the codes into our EPR, and that takes a lot of time. What we've now done is, because we scan everything, we've got robust data, and year before last, we had an implant recall. There was a 5-on-4 investigation that came out in BBC News last year, but the event is from year before last. And all it took us, or the team, was a press of a button. In 17 minutes, 1,300 plus records were scanned, and we were able to tell which patients exactly had those implants. Let's look at another scenario, for instance. Again, MHRA sends a lot of alerts. Let's say there's an alert 4 months ago, and the alert saying, don't use this implant. The implant is already in the stock. What stops us from using that implant? At the minute, how often would we remember an alert that came out 4 months ago? You would see in various rooms a lot of alerts being pasted, but when it comes to actual use, it's quite easy to forget that. What CareScan does is, you're scanning it at the time of use, at the point of care, and if there's any sort of alert, expiry, mismatch, some other things like these, it will send an alert and say, stop, don't use it. At the end of the day, it's only a decision support tool. Clinicians can override it if they wish to, but that's how it does.
I think it's often described as a sort of second pair of eyes whilst you're in that situation. And I think a lot of time you think about data and capturing that afterwards and what you can do with it, but actually having real-time data and being able to use that whilst you're in a tense situation like a theatre, it it's really helpful. I mean, we've heard there the sort of clinical side of this. I think, Mark, it'd be really good to sort of get your perspective, because you're coming at this from a completely different angle. You know, you're looking at this from a procurement operations perspective. What are the challenges on your side, and what does better inventory management unlock for a trust?
I think it leads on that from what we're saying. In terms of those very manual processes, make it very difficult to properly manage the stock. So I'm sure a lot of you recognise we have patient stickers in book. We used to have patient stickers in books. We put the device implant sticker in a book. We then have another book that we get to write the serial number in. We then have the system. We have to go type that serial number again into the system. That adds a lot of complexity, a lot of resource into the sort of stock management process, which ultimately that increased effort and difficulty means we end up holding more stock than we should. So to get around the fact that most stock management processes, we just essentially have more stock on the shelf. Having more stock on the shelf leads to more wastage, mainly through expiry and other things like that. So that those manual processes are really a barrier for us managing stock properly. In terms of the benefits, so we can do away with all of those manual processes. It's that, scanning the product at the point of care means you have data that you can use in multiple systems, including your inventory management system. So if we know an implant has been used and we're down on the shelf, within minutes we can have the replacement order ready for us. And that data then gets used in other places as well. So for us, we're using it to feed our payment by results or our SSDP. If anyone's been involved in those reports, I'm sure you love them. We can sort of semi-automate that reporting, so we're able to give clinicians time back to look after patients, and we can give them reports to make their life a lot easier.
Thanks, Mark. And I'll stay with you, because I think the next thing we want to talk about is really building the case around this. We recognise that I think everyone's probably seen technology that they think could be really useful, but you've got to get the business case right. You've got to make sure that you bring in all the stakeholders internally on that journey with you. So before you need this and you get in that approval, Mark, what does that look like at Trust? What does it look like for you inside the teams, or as it's now the universities hospital? And what do they need to do to make that case?
Yes, I think we probably did it the hard way, which is good, because then I can be lessons learned. Give them the lighthouse for other people to avoid the rocks. The main thing is this isn't a one department thing, so it's not a procurement problem or a clinical problem or an IT problem. You really need that sort of that multidisciplinary, buy-in from everybody there. So focusing on those senior clinicians who are able to influence what happens in the theatres, making sure IT is there to support the BIU teams, and you can actually, you don't set the data in silos, because you're sharing it across all the areas that need it. So scan it once and use it many times, that's sort of motto. I think the other side is where we learned the lesson on it is obviously dealing with people on the ground. So a lot of the initial resistance was around, we're all very busy. You giving me something else to do? So we spent a lot of effort on the as-is and the to-be processes, saying, this is actually going to help you. So if you work with, say, the clinicians in the theatres, you can develop really good sort of new workflows and workflows that benefit everybody.
Absolutely, and I think you talked there about those different teams being involved. I think, Ish, from your perspective, when we speak to people around the country, I think around point of scanning and the issues around this, many clinicians sort of think that it can be maybe an admin task or something that is really designed at cost saving rather than patient safety. How do you respond to that? You've seen it at both sides from it's an interesting perspective.
I might just add a few things to what we mentioned. So I'm in Maltese, and societies in Maltese are now in a group model. We deployed our scan for safety solution, which is CareScan, back in 2020. And this was October 2020, so between the first and second COVID peak. We started in our smaller site, which is our surgical hub. That's where the bulk of orthopedic surgery happens. And on day 5, all 6 theatres were live with it. And what teams realized was it actually doesn't take time to scan. So it's not an extra effort. If you build it into your flow, it saves time. As an example, that is the device. Imagine you just scan it. Tick. You have to scan 15 products versus putting it manually onto your system. how much time does that save? So coming back to your question,
so I was asking about, the mindset.
about the clinical. I think to understand that, we had some conversations about scan for safety in the morning. I think let's look at this from a scan for safety lens. Scan for safety is a national program. It encompasses 3 broad pillars. One is point of care scanning, so that's scanning using the handheld device at the patient's bedside. Second is inventory management solution, which we're talking about. And the third is having the infrastructure, so that includes devices, your Wi-Fi access, etc. And all of these uses national standards. There's a standard called GS1. It's the same standard that's used on every grocery product. So when we go to Tesco and scan something, it's the same barcode or same standards that are used. In other words, what we scan leads to robust data. Once you have robust data, all the conversations we're having in the morning about using AI, if your data is robust, you can do a lot of things downstream. We started submitting to the, I don't know how many of you have heard of the mandated National Medical Device Outcome Registry. We were the first NHS trust to start submitting to that data set. And I think it's things like these, when clinical teams start to understand the value that this tool brings, something that it's not creating more work for them, but it's essentially streamlining their processes, and it just becomes a lot easier to adopt. And from our own experience, when we went live, first we went live in Hartlepool in 1 week. We went live. In another 4 months' time, we went on our main site, again, over there as well. There was hardly any resistance.
And I think, we're talking here about, transformation using technology, and we've probably all been in talks like this over the last 20 years, talking about data, digital transformation. It's quite often difficult to figure out where to start. We're seeing here an example of a trust that's rolled this out, and it's really kind of, across all the theatres. What would you say to somebody who thinks, well, this is a great idea, but where do I start? As a clinician, what do I need to do when I go back to my trust? Who do I speak to?
So I also worked with the digital team. I was a clinical safety officer for a few years. And I think the first thing is technology needs to be adopted only if you need it. So the first thing that all organizations need to try and assess is, do we need a technology like this? So the question that we could ask is, if there was to be a product recall, how would we pull all that data? If you've already got a process, then probably you don't need a scan for safety solution. But if you don't, then you need a scan for safety solution. I'm not saying it should be CareScan, there are lots of other solutions as well. Sorry, what was your question again?
So we're talking about when you...
So if you need, again, it ultimately comes down to something that we use a lot in digital streams is about people process technology. So first find out what you need, get the people on board, get the processes right, and then introduce technology. If you introduce technology with the wrong process, wrong people, it's not going to work. So you need alignment of people, so you need clinical teams, frontline teams, I wouldn't say clinical, whoever is going to use that product. Frontline teams, you need your operational teams involved, you need business planning, you need digital team. That's where I would start. I think the first thing would be start with the question, what are the gaps? If there's a product recall, how are we going to solve it? If there's a never event, would we have prevented this never event by having a scan for safety solution?
And I guess the same question to you, Marc. If there are people in here that are either in procurement or from an operational perspective, where do they start in terms of maybe building that initial stakeholder group or getting implemented?
I think given the changes that are happening externally, it's almost the fact that you can't progress without this now. So we've seen the outcome registries coming, which you can't fulfill the requirements of the outcome registry, I don't believe, within sort of almost real-time reports without having a system like this in place. So I think there is that sort of burning platform there. I also think around NHS finances, I'm sure we're all in the same boat. It's always challenging. Better management of your stock. If you wave that in front of your finance director, he'd be on board. So I know in our initial implementation, we reduced our stock by 1.5 million. That was almost 50% of the stock we took off the shelf. That was in conjunction with collisions. We didn't do anything on our own, and there is still some sort of more to go at. So there's a host of benefits, and I think what's important here is we're not talking about sort of two different systems. There's actually one system that can meet all of our needs, so clinical needs, finance, and procurement.
I think that's important to that end-to-end view of it as well. It's always, I guess, slightly more daunting when you think there's more surface areas that a system like that is going to touch, but I think if you've got that end-to-end view, it makes a real difference. I think we've got a couple of minutes left to finish. I think, if we were to say what are the things that, if people are holding up, what would they be holding us around, and what would you sort of say to somebody who's thinking, yeah, this is not really for me, and we don't think our hospital's quite there yet. What would you say?
Well, I'm just reflecting. So last year, April, we had the GS1 conference in London, and prominent surgeon who also happens to be a politician said something very remarkable. As a surgeon, I need to know that what I'm using is safe and traceable. So the way I would say is, scan for safety and scan for safety solutions is no longer an optional bolt-on. It's an absolute must. And the kind of stuff you can do. I mean, I've only highlighted a few things. We can do a digital checklist on it, and it's not just a digital checklist. We've tried this in our EPR. We've struggled to create a checklist on our EPR. If you are able to use it, you can not only use it in a very portable, handheld digital format, you can create live dashboards. So when we were talking earlier about audits for an audit, we've got a real-time dashboard. Anyone can go in and look at what the problem areas are. Other things, for instance, again, an extension of our implant scanning and safety mechanism. We have developed an API link with the live national joint registry. So in the coming months, if we scan something and there is an alert that hasn't been flagged to us but is there on the national joint registry, that again will be flagged. So the opportunities are enormous, and I don't think I think the time of, it's no longer an optional thing. I think every organization must have a scan for safety solution.
Is there anything you'd add to that, Mark? If people are holding back and thinking, well, we'll just wait another year and see where the market goes?
So, yeah, but like I wouldn't. So, I mean, there is so much stuff out there as well to help people if you feel it's a bit daunting. There's a lot of information. If you look at the Scan for Safety websites, there's case studies in terms of what the demonstrator sites have achieved. If you look at some of the GS1 resources, there's template business cases that you can use. So really, there's a lot of data out there. And I bet if you go back to organisations and ask the Escape Scan for Safety champion, there will be someone. I mean, that program is going about 10 years now. There will be someone in your organisation who's interested. Whenever we've gone to have a discussion with the clinicians, I think one of them fed back to say, what's taken you so long? So there's definitely an appetite out there, and if you go back and test that, I think there will be people that are willing to support.
I think that's it. I think one thing we'd reinforce is that there are people out there, likely in your organisation, there are frameworks that exist. We've heard about Scan for Safety, Ish spoke about GS1, and I know there are some GS1 representatives here today. There's a lot of people pulling towards this target, so I think you'll find support quite quickly if you go looking for it. I think the thing that we would try and highlight from this discussion is the fact that there are two sides to this. There is the clinical side and the clinician benefits, the patient benefits, and there's also benefits for the organisation in terms of managing those costs. We're going to be around for the rest of the day so we can answer lots of questions on our stand, but we're also going to be able to Q&A. So yeah, thank you guys for being part of this.
Thank you all. Take your seats on the table. That's okay. Welcome back, Karen, for the Q&A. We won't take you too long. long. We know lunches here and your tummies are probably rumbling. But I've just spoken to Karen as well, and she is around for a while. So we will take 1 or 2 questions from you guys, and then we'll go to lunch. So is there anybody from the audience who has questions?
So I get to put one of them.
Everybody's desperate to go for lunch then? Is that what it is? You want to ask a question? Okay,
Can I ask a question about day surgery? Sorry. Last week, or it was within the last 3 or 4 weeks, girls came up with a paper around day case thyroid